This session is going to explore how to design for two things attendees want: a place to feel something and a place to do something. It's an immersive sort of theaters and interactive playground. So please welcome Amy and Rich from Pinnacle to the stage. Welcome. Thank you. And Amy and Rich, feel free to take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Lisa. And thanks everyone for being here. We are very excited. We have a quick 15 minutes to share all of our knowledge with you. So hopefully we can nail that, and we're going to get right in. So I think we talk a lot about, trade shows and exhibits. A lot of you probably have programs that you do where you maybe go to one show a year or multiple shows a year. And I feel like people get very paralyzed, but how do we design those spaces? How do we design those spaces for impact and for them to be exciting? And so as Rich and I were ideating on how we could potentially bring value to this audience, we started to talk about how do we capture both the theaters and the playgrounds that we're calling of the trade show floor, and kind of creating this strategic framework. Our intention in the next couple minutes is to actually give you something that you can take back to your team and give you some actionable information that you can use next time you're ready to design a new exhibit and bring a new experience to life. So let's kind of define these two spaces. I think
real quick, Amy, you are sharing the presenter view.
Oh no, let's try that.
Perfect.
Perfect. Awesome. So as we start to think about these two spaces, we have all been to an incredibly boring trade show booth. Many, many times we've been attendees, potentially accidentally stepped over the carpet, and then you're in the space, you've made eye contact with a sales rep, you have to take a brochure because it's polite. And it's not necessarily an experience that's pulling you in, that's telling a good story, and that's going to make you remember that brand after the fact. So that's sort of what we're dealing with on the left-hand side, where these it might be a nice looking booth, it might be attractive, but it's emotionally flat. It's not making you feel something. It's not getting you excited or interested or intrigued. On the flip side, we've also all seen those booths that have the hospitality and the engagement, and there's a caricature artist, and there's these crazy graphics, and there's flashing lights, and you're like, oh my goodness, what is going on here? What is the story they're trying to tell? What's the point? I don't know where to look. Maybe the booth is packed, but it's packed because they're serving champagne at 2:00 in the afternoon, not because it's a great trade show experience. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how to, strike the right balance of both, because neither a straight theater or a straight playground are designed as experiences. And that's the goal here, is that we don't just slap a carpet square on the ground and put some storage, units and tables on it and call it a day. So we're just going to break that down a little bit further.
Thank you, Amy. So a lot of buzzwords are kind of getting thrown around in events, right? So you hear experiential, what does that mean? You hear immersive, what does that mean? And I think by kind of separating these two elements and this new framework, I kind of hope to demystify that a little bit with Amy. So people think immersive, they kind of think of projection mapping and this sort of environment, but there's levels to it, right? And immersion is great, but the best immersion and the best experiential allows you to actually engage with the environment. So if we're going to separate that, you have your theater elements and you have your playground elements. And the very best booths, if you think back to things that you visited and memories that you can actually recall months or years later at a show, it's because the exhibitor really leaned into both sides equally, right? So they created a space where not only they were telling a story, but a space for their people to actually engage with the story. So for your theater, right, this is before logic kicks in or anything. It's kind of signaling to the attendees' brains, is this worth me going to? So you have about 3 to 5 seconds to capture someone's attention on a busy trade show floor. Me just telling you that was that amount of time, right? So your theater is clarity, it is providing a message, and it's drawing that attention. So you're earning that attention from the attendees on the show floor. The playground, this is where you keep the attention, because while storytelling is great, it can be a bit vague, and storytelling is awesome, but story sharing and people taking part in that brand story is the really powerful thing that really leads to a memorable experience. because you can stage any kind of event you want, but if people aren't interacting with it and engaging with it, they're all experiencing it the same way. If you give people a place to actually engage with the story that you're telling, they experience it uniquely. And then to them, it's a very personal moment that they'll actually recall. So these two kind of ideas for a trade show booth, that's what we're kind of focusing on with this deck. And now moving on to it, I hear this all the time, almost too much, right? And it stems from an exhibitor having problems with their current partner or internally. A lot of people focus on the floor plan, right? It becomes almost like a logistics exercise. And when you just focus on this, and it's the main driver for how you're curating this event or this trade show booth, you kind of run the risk of just logistics dominating the experience, right? And you could almost become basically a storage room with carpeting, right? And that's absolutely not what you want. So I hear attendee flow a lot. I hear a lot of exhibitors saying, I want a nice open floor space. I want a nice open booth that's warm and welcoming. Like, that's great, but without like a true curated journey for your attendee and giving them spaces to actually participate, you're just creating an open space that makes it easier for them to walk through your booth and go to a competitor's. So the very first element here is part of the theater, right? So this is the feel. Again, the visual hook. Is this brand worth my attention? Is it worth my time? Do I need to go in here and explore something? Mm-hmm. Beyond that, you have your playground, right? What am I doing in here? Like, I think you have about 5 to 10 minutes before you lose somebody completely if they think it's worth engaging, right? How do they participate in what you've created, right? Like, they need to learn by actually touching things and feeling things and try to engage their senses. That's going to create like a long-lasting memory for this experience. And then finally, the last step of the journey here for your attendees is the deepen, right? So feel, do, deepen. Deepen happens, it's that beautiful crossroads of theater and playground mixing. People are invested, they've bought into the brand, they've bought into the story, they want to learn more. And this is when the relationships happen. And it's all intentional. This last part, if you've done the first two parts correctly, the last part is so easy. People want to invest in you. This can go from attendees that didn't know who you were. This can go from partners that you've established. This deepening of any pillar of your brand equity can happen right here if you have a good balance of theater and playground to let people experience your brand for themselves.
I think a lot of brands, think that they have to strike this like perfect 50-50 balance. And there's definitely going to be scenarios where that's not the case. And so we wanted to break down a couple of those instances, and hopefully, or potentially one of these is like, oh, I know I'm going to have a situation like this, next year in my program. So there's a few instances where you might want to lean a little bit heavier into the theater and the storytelling and the emotion element of that. The first is if you have a new product launch, right? There is an education element there. You are telling your audience something new. We know data shows that one of the main reasons attendees go to trade show is to see what's new and different out there. So that's an opportunity to lean very heavily into the storytelling and theater aspect and create that buzz. The next is brand repositioning. We see brands they have a new strategic priority, or they reposition, or they rebrand, or there's new assets all the time, right? And a lot of times those of us who work in the trade show space are like, okay, I got to update all my assets. It's a huge undertaking, but it's also a moment for you to really establish what that new story is for your brand and tell that to your audience in a way that helps them understand, why did you change? What does that mean for what you stand for as a brand? And how are you going to continue to be a trusting and authentic brand for your audience with this new positioning and branding that may even look different to them than they're used to? And then the last is if you have potentially gone through a merger or an acquisition or, some sort of a blending of companies, which we see so often in this industry. And you kind of need to tell your audience that and educate them that, like, hey, don't worry, we're still us, we're still here, but we have this new thing now that is bigger and better, and here's why it's going to benefit you. So those are some of the situations where you'd want to lean a little bit more into the theater piece of it, but obviously not exclusively so, because then you kind of lose that engagement balance. On the flip side,
real quick, Amy, I don't even know if you can see, but it says, can you click the hide
Yeah.
There you go. Okay, then they won't miss any of your slides.
Yes. I don't know if you guys can see that or not. Okay, great. So on the flip side, on kind of that playground, more engagement focused side, there's some areas where you want to lean a little bit heavily into this. A lot of brands have very complex products that require you to touch and feel, to see it, to do some sort of hands-on demo, or maybe if you can't bring the product to the show floor, a VR experience, something like that, where the engagement and the interaction piece is increasingly more important. The next is if you have some very vast or technical audiences who value getting into the product. So if you're going to engineering shows or working with healthcare professionals that really need to understand the mechanism or the engineering behind something, you're going to want to bring that to life in a bit more of a playground environment. And sometimes those things feel at odds because you think technical and playground and those words don't quite work in a sentence together, but there's ways to bring things to life that are much more engagement forward. And then the last is if you're trying to convert some skeptical buyers, right? It's obviously a great opportunity on a trade show floor, at an event, or at an activation. If you have people who are skeptical, give them an opportunity to experience your product firsthand, hear patient or customer stories so that they can understand how it's relevant to them, and obviously convert them from a skeptical buyer to a less skeptical buyer. So as we start to kind of summarize this and close this out, we said at the beginning, we want this to feel like something that is actionable for your teams. And so you can all go back and say, hey, let me take a look at my program and see how I can maybe adjust it. Are we too theater? Are we too playground? Is there a line, that feels right for our brand and our program? Or do we have one of these potentially specific events coming up where we might need to lean more heavily into one or the other? So as Rich and I have been saying, you're not just throwing some storage kiosks on a carpet. I think a lot of times we, as brands, we set up our beautiful booths and we work painstakingly on, and we say people are going to show up and we hope they engage and maybe they'll buy something. And we have to be so much more intentional about that as the world has changed and as attendee behavior has changed and what people are looking for from brands has continued to change. So we want to look for a clear focal point. Obviously, this is kind of a big thing. This is not necessarily earth-shattering, but thinking about it in this sense might be a little bit different than how you framed the problem historically. You want to put those interactive moments at the beginning. So not just to pull them in and then sort of let them go throughout the space and hopefully they chat with someone, but how do you pull them in with those interactive moments and then carry the story through with that theater playground balance? And then, as Rich pointed out, how do you design an experience and not a floor plan? How are you helping your attendees understand that they're going to walk in the space, they're going to have an initial welcome conversation here, and then we want to traffic them towards a demo kiosk so they can get educated on the product. And then once they're educated, we want to show them a demo, and that's a build on the conversations they've already had. So it becomes much more intentional. So to kind of bring it all home, really the theaters are what's drawing people in. They're creating the draw. You want to go and you want to sit and you want to watch a theater, but you don't want to just be a stagnant audience, right? You want to be able to do more. So then the playground environment creates dwell time and makes it, a longer experience, and it increases their retention and a bit, likelihood to convert. And obviously together they create momentum, because all of this is rooted in helping people feel something and helping them remember the brand, remember the product, and remember their experience when they leave the show and go back to their teams after it is all over.